When I do our stories about how Google is the font of all evil, people often ask me, well, what do we do? What's the alternative? And there are a few things. One of which is, if you grew up in a small town like I did, get a subscription to your local hometown newspaper. There are very few actual journalists left in America at any level, but they are at the local level. At the national level, I can think of two journalists who still do real good journalism about what's going on in all 50 states. One of those people is Dave Marcus. He is a guy who has the pulse of the American public. He actually puts in the sweat equity and the shoe leather into figuring out where Americans are on issues and how they're thinking about policies and politics. Dave, thank you for joining us here.
Thanks for having me.
What's going on in America today?
There's a lot of frustration in America today. When I was in Toledo just the other day. I was driving on the way to Milwaukee, and I was talking to a couple guys who they work on freight ships, right? Not in the ocean and around the Great Lakes and the rivers and stuff like that. Two very interesting guys. They do 6 and 3, so they'll be 6 months on the boat, 3 months off. Interesting way to live. And I mean, their concerns are really the kitchen table concerns that, Joe Biden pays a lot of lip service to, and he likes to talk about how much his dad struggled financially or something, but like they're not feeling any kind of relief from Biden. They're also not feeling a whole lot of empathy. A lot of the people that I talk to feel like they're kind of being told by politicians and by some people in the media, like, what's wrong with you? Like, things are so good. Like, why can't you see it?
Yeah. So when it comes to the media, do they feel like they're being deceived by the media? Do they think the media is just part of a racket?
No, they do. No, they know they're being deceived by the media. They know because they see the stuff unravel, right? They've seen that the media told them that the Hunter Biden laptop was, an information operation when it wasn't. They saw Russian collusion. They lived through COVID. They know that the media is lying to them. They also know that the media isn't listening to them. One of the things that's interesting about being here at the RNC, right, is that it's almost like a high school reunion for political journalists, right? All of us from all our different places, we come and we see each other. And what happens too much is we're getting hot takes off each other, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's really just bouncing around within the inner sanctum of journalism. And the voices of people who aren't journalists or who don't live in New York or DC are kind of excluded from that conversation.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, I grew up in a small town in Kansas. And then I went to law school in one of these snobby Northeast schools, Columbia, where all the anti-Semites now reside, and practiced law in New York, then moved to DC. And I was working then with a lot of Northeast elites.
Yeah.
And I would have to tell these people, both in New York and in Washington, D.C., when you're talking to Kansas farmers or guys in Iowa or wherever, do not condescend to them. They know more about U.S. trade policy than the typical House committee staffer knows. It's their livelihood. These are smart people. J.D. Vance, I think, has just sort of demonstrated this. He's a hillbilly from West Virginia and a Yale law grad. Do not assume that just because somebody's not from the East Coast, they're not smart.
No, that's exactly right. And I'll tell you a funny story. So the first time I started doing this sort of like forgotten America man on the street thing, I'll be honest, I completely stole it from Selena Zito, who I think is the best.
Well, she's the other one.
She's the other one.
You and Selena Zito are the two great ones.
And I've told Selena this. Like I saw what she did in 2016, and she was the first one to say, "Wait a minute, there's something going on here with Trump." And everybody was like, "Come on," and she says, "No, I'm talking to people like Gas." They accused her of making it up.
Yeah, right.
She was called a liar.
Literally making up stories. These aren't real people.
Yes, these aren't real.
Fabricating it.
And I loved it. I mean, I was eating it up. And so when the next cycle came in 2019, I was working at the Federalist and I was like, I want to do this. Mm-hmm. And the first time I did it, I was driving out to like Arkansas and back, and my first stop was Wheeling, West Virginia, from New York to Wheeling, West Virginia. Park. I'm checked in the hotel. I'm going to this sports bar. And I think to myself, Dave, you're an idiot. you're about to walk into a sports bar in Wheeling, West Virginia and say, hey, I was actually writing this for the Post. Hey, I'm this guy from New York that I wrote for the New York Post, and like I'd like to hear what you have. And I'm like, why would these people want to talk to you, right? Like, I'm like, this is so stupid, but I may as well go try. I couldn't shut them up, and I haven't been able to shut them up for 5 years because they know they're not being heard. They know that nobody's listening to them. So when you actually go to them and say, hey, what do you think? You can't stop them.
Yeah.
And what they think, to your point, is erudite, it's fascinating, it's well-informed, and it's better than the polls because the polls give you this very flat, two-dimensional cardboard cutout. It gives you the idea that there are like 3 to 5 types of Americans and everyone fits into one of these boxes. In fact, nobody fits into any of those boxes. Everybody that you meet is nuanced, and you can meet the person who is, pro-immigration and pro-life, right? So where are you putting them?
Yeah.
You can also see where's the emphasis, right? Polls don't have facial expressions.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't know that.
You can test intensity,
yes.
but intensity falls into one of 5 categories in a poll.
Yeah.
It doesn't really
It's not
tell
a facial
you much.
expression. It's not, I can see that this is something that really moves this person
one word
or
might
angers this person.
Means something to one person and another word to another. They may not like that the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade,
right?
But for very different reasons.
Absolutely. And so, look, there's some tricks, for, aspiring journalists, I guess. Like I said, there's 2 easy tricks. When you walk into a space, you're usually doing this at like a bar or restaurant space or something like that where people are communal. You can do there's other things, state fairs, whatever. But if you do go into the bar, first of all, ideally you want to sit at the corner because that gives you access to a broader range. But more important than that is you want to find the guy. Right? The guy. There's a guy.
Every bar has a guy.
Usually the guy who everything kind of goes through, and they know the bartender's name, and they do this and that, And once you unlock the guy, now you've got access to everything.
Yeah. Everybody else will spill the beans.
Yes.
This is what, yeah.
And,
Joe over here has just disclosed stuff, so I'm free to talk about it too.
You can also get a sort of a sense of who but whose ideas represent a broad spectrum of people within a community as opposed to the one-off guy who's the conspiracy theorist or whatever it is. But you have to get a little bit of a sense of that too. But it's very useful. And it's just something we don't hear. We just don't hear their opinions and attitudes and ideas.
Okay, so at the Media Research Center, we're obviously very concerned about legacy media bias and the misinformation that they promote in the name of misinformation. And we're also very concerned about the role of the big social media platforms. Because both matter.
Yeah.
When I was looking at jury selection in the Alvin Bragg criminal case against Trump, every single one of the jurors said that they got their news from Google.
Yeah.
And some others.
Right.
Some got it also from the New York Times, and some from Washington Post, some from ABC, some from NPR, whatever. But they all got their news, their information from Google. And Google is every bit as focused on trying to indoctrinate people into their point of view. Do these people in Toledo and in Tuscaloosa and in Topeka and Boise, do they also see these social media companies as putting their thumb on the scale? Or are they less aware of what big tech is doing?
No, I don't think that. I don't think that they. I mean, I don't think people in New York and DC tend to either. I don't think they understand the extent to which Google is not a neutral arbiter of here's what I'm going to give you, right? They probably assume what they're getting is whatever website has the most hits or something like that, right? There's some arbitrary way in which, as opposed to an algorithm that's pushing things in a specific direction. I think they understand that a little more in regard to social media as opposed to search function.
Yeah.
Because in social media, a lot of people are sort of aware of what happened when Musk took over and the concept of free speech on social media. But even there, I'm not sure there's a sophisticated understanding of how the algorithms work. I mean, I'm not sure I have a sophisticated understanding of how the algorithm. Yeah. I don't know that Musk knows how his algorithms actually work.
Yeah. All right. So one last question for you. Take your time answering it. People oftentimes ask me, as I led off with, how do I, if Google is so biased and social media platforms and legacy media, Dan, how do you keep informed? How do you get the real news? Let me ask you that same question. How do you, because you are a consumer of information, a consumer of news, and then you write in a column better than almost anybody I know.
Oh,
how do you stay informed?
I mean, I stay informed because I don't have a day job. I can just, I can do what a normal person can't do, which is to spend 12 hours a day consuming news. Right. And so I'm seeing all of the different.
Okay. So if a person has 45 minutes.
That's what, yeah. Look, I think you need to find.
Read Dave Marcus.
Right? You need to find the outlets you trust. I mean, I work with Morning Wire, and we're so careful, right? It's 15 minutes. It's 3 stories in the morning. We're so careful. One of the things that I think to myself is I never want to jam up the guy at the water cooler, right? I never want the guy who listens to me at the water cooler to say something on Monday, and then on Wednesday, it turns out I was wrong and they're made a fool of.
Right.
So I don't think there's enough consequences in journalism, quite frankly. I think like if you get something wrong in a negligent way, that should probably be it. Mm-hmm. Right. I don't think there are second chances. I don't think this idea of, but we corrected it. No. Wittgenstein said, what can be said clearly. And whereof one cannot know, thereof one must remain silent. So if you're looking at journalists who are trying to tell you that they know things that they can't actually know, look, they may be entertaining and it may be fun to read, but don't count on that as being accurate.
Dave, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.